Hi, I'm Bob Powell, the CEO of Family Service and Children's Aid. I was asked to do this video so that we might be able to help you understand how to become a trauma-informed organization. I'm also the manager for the Trauma-Informed Community Collaborative, helping to lead the Jackson County community to become more trauma-informed. And so I'd like to share with you what our organization went through, the process that we went through to become more trauma-informed. So to become trauma-informed, it means to have approaches that describe activities that seek to prevent and treat the impact of trauma and toxic stress. And so we have educated our staff as to what trauma is, what it looks like, what toxic stress is, what it looks like, and I mean all of our staff throughout their employment. Doesn't depend on their role in any way, and we continue to offer those trainings as new staff come in. As a matter of fact, this video will be used for our orientation for new staff as well. It also is, to be trauma-informed, means to have specific activities that are associated with trauma-informed approaches. But this may also vary. That depends on your services that you offer, how often, the intensity that you offer them, as well as the population that you serve. So at the very core of trauma-informed approaches, there's compassionate care, and that it recognizes the prevalence that trauma has and the impact that it has. This is a good time for me to point out that we are also making all of our staff and supervisors very aware of the trauma impact that it has on our staff in working with customers and clients that have been traumatized. So we address secondhand trauma, secondary trauma, vicarious trauma as well. In attempts to provide or restore a sense of safety, self-efficacy, and empowerment for those that seek services. The specific practices of a trauma-informed approach vary, again, depending on your setting and your population. However, they should include at least the 6 domains that SAMHSA has identified as evidence-based practices and approaches for trauma-informed integration in organizations. And those are safety, trustworthy and transparency, peer support, collaboration and mutuality, empowerment, voice and choice, and cultural, historical, and gender issues. Now I'll talk more specifically about what each of those are. Safety. So within our policies and practices, we address safety, not only for consumers, but for staff. It's important that you understand that all 6 principles should be applied to certainly your clients, but as well as your organization and your staff as well. Trustworthiness and transparency. This means that decisions are made with transparency, and services and our policies and practices protect both our clients and our staff. And then peer support. This means that we refer or help our clients to build supports in their own lives, but that we also build supports in coaching and various other avenues for our staff as well. Collaboration and mutuality. This is where staff participate in program improvements and clients develop their own treatment strategies. Also known as person-centered planning with clients, and our staff, we solicit feedback in many different forums, random surveys, and in team meetings as well. Empowerment, voice, and choice. Families exercise the choice in the way their services are provided, but it also provides feedback to our organizations. This is where satisfaction surveys are very important, and one of the first things that we did with our organization was to put trauma-informed questions into our satisfaction surveys. Cultural, historical, and gender issues. Policies and practices address cultural, historical oppression, and gender needs. So our organization, Family Service and Children's Aid, was asked to pilot an instrument that assesses organizations as well as helps to develop action plans to address whatever areas we identified as having to be improved upon. This was a pilot that we did with the state of Michigan and various other providers of services throughout the state of Michigan. Within this instrument, it also gave us not only a self-assessment checklist, but planning tools, recommended strategies, training approaches, and resources. And of course, we'd be glad to share that instrument if you're interested. You can just go to our website and contact us. So part of the process of identifying the areas that we felt we may need to improve on for trauma integration began with me introducing this approach to all of our staff, our entire agency. So I rolled it out and let them know that we were going to be doing a self-assessment and asking for their participation. This may be very big for some of your organizations like our own, and so what I did was limit it to children's services programs that we offer, so it was much more doable. It doesn't mean that you can't generalize and go further out with all of your programs and staff as well, but I chose to do it that way to get a snapshot at least of where we were at with trauma-informed practices within our children's services. So we did it in January of 2016 to all levels of staff, which is important because it gives you different perspectives depending on the job that the staff person holds. They included administrators, supervisors, certainly our services staff, and support staff. Remember, I started this video out by telling you that it's important that all levels of staff are informed and trained in recognizing trauma and how to deal with trauma when they do recognize the signs and symptoms. Again, by incorporating many levels of staff, you get multiple voices. That ensures a good perspective that are heard, and it also helps staff to own the process that we entered into. You shouldn't consider involving consumers. Unfortunately, we did not have the time to do that. And interesting enough, one of our domains that was the weakest involved giving our clients a voice. So these were the findings after we took our survey. And what I did was take the 3 lowest domains to develop an action plan around. Again, they were empowerment and voice, general principles, and safety. General principles involve policies and practices as well as at an administrative level. So as part of the process, it's important that you also identify your strengths while doing so, not just the areas for growth, but what you're doing well is also very important to build off from. So approaches to action planning, once you've identified the areas that you would like to work on, can vary. It could be done as a group, it can be done by programs, it can be done with individuals. I did it myself and then solicited feedback from staff as well as the peer group that I was in piloting this instrument. So again, once the largest gaps are identified, you develop an action plan using the trauma-informed approach planning tool that's included in this guide that I'm speaking of. And it also provided recommendations and suggestions. I had to tweak them so that they were more specific to our needs and our programs, but they served well. When identifying action steps, it's really important that you are realistic within the timelines and the resources that you have available. But most importantly, that they are going to be impactful and make a change that you're seeking. It was very intensive, and I needed as much support and feedback as I could garner. Organizational leaders should actively support and guide implementation of the plan. It's important that trauma integration starts from the top. They create the culture and the importance, but staff are not going to own it and implement it unless they're part of the decision-making process. So it really does have to come from the top down. Whenever possible, it's important that you involve consumers in planning. And as I said, we did not do that in the beginning, but we certainly have now by integrating trauma questions into our satisfaction surveys. It's important that even once you have established a plan, that this is ongoing. And certainly it was important that we got some basic trauma information out to our staff through offering trainings, but we continue to offer trainings on a regular basis. So your action plan to address the gaps that you want to work on are broken into short-term goals, intermediate goals, and long-term goals. And here's our plan that I would like to share with you. So in our first phase, our first 6 months, it was something that I thought we could accomplish quickly, or we have already begun to do so. So we trained our support staff. That's the first thing that we did. From our reception to the support staff that offer supervised visits for our child welfare programs. But it was important that all staff became aware of what trauma looked like, signs and symptoms, and what may trigger further trauma in both our staff and clients. It was also important that we started to get a consumer's voice. And as I indicated earlier, we did modify our satisfaction survey to involve trauma-related questions. The third thing that we accomplished, identified and then accomplished, was that our leadership, from myself all the way down through all the supervisory levels, endorsed and embraced a trauma-informed approach. And so we not only announced it, but we continue to keep this information in front of our staff through all staff trainings and meetings, so that they were watching the progress as it unfolded, and owned it, of course. We also started a steering committee. This was a very important component that we decided to do so that it could help to guide and continue to do the work once we completed our phase 1. So in phase 2, this was really after 6 to 9 months entering into our second year. We identified that we wanted to offer a systematic way to debrief our staff when they had experienced traumatic incidents in working with their clients. So we did some research and we developed a model, and then we trained all of our supervisors in it. And then we realized that there was still not a systematic way for it to occur. So we we revised our incident reports and wrote into the incident reports asking if debriefing occurred and by whom. So that helped to ensure that it would take place. And these incident reports are, of course, filled out by our staff persons, but also are signed off by a supervisor as well as myself, so that there's a check and balance to ensure that if it was a traumatic incident, how debriefing occurred and if additional support needed to take place. We also realized that the foremost way to counter trauma in our clients and staff is to build resiliency. So we started to do research and develop trainings around resiliency, building activities, and began to offer trainings as well as activities within the agency. One such result was that we developed a wellness committee. The wellness committee is a very instrumental piece, instrument instrumental vehicle that continues to put self-care at the front of our staff and have come up with some great ideas like a walking club. They're working on getting a regular yoga class here. Nutrition classes have come in. So different activities that can be offered that help to build resiliency in our staff. The third step or goal that we accomplished in our second phase was to begin to embrace employment practices for trauma-informed approaches so that they are integrated throughout the organization. Currently, we are training our staff in trauma-informed supervision. So we had a committee that worked on, from the steering committee, a committee that worked on developing a trauma-informed supervisory toolkit. And we are currently training our supervisors on different tools that they may use with their staff to measure burnout, compassion fatigue, and various other things, as well as help to build resiliency and keep self-care in the forefront of their supervision with their staff. So then we are currently in our third phase, which means that we have entered into our third year now of working on becoming more trauma-informed. We have been looking at policies and developing policies for trauma-informed practices and ensuring that these practices address secondary trauma in our staff. And again, that is an ongoing assessment that's taking place. We are in the planning stage of developing a committee for our board for youth and family advisory so that they can continue to give us feedback beyond just what we get from satisfaction surveys. And then we have begun to ensure that all new staff are trained in what it means to be trauma-informed. And this is a good reason for this video as well. And of course, we have adopted a trauma-informed supervisory model that we have implemented that really is very similar to reflective supervision. So here's some of the things that our steering committee has accomplished. We formed it in April of 2016, so it's been in existence. It'll be going on 2 years, so about 1.5 years. It is consistently assessing program needs and training needs and recommends and is instrumental in making sure ongoing training is taking place. Again, they accomplished a trauma-informed client satisfaction survey. We've developed not only a systematic way of debriefing our staff when they've been exposed to trauma, we've also developed a support group for our staff that they can access, and it is confidential and it is offered during business hours. So that's something we're proud of. Again, we've been developing a trauma-informed supervisory model. We've been preparing trainings on resiliency. We're in the process of assessing and recommending policies, and we're very proud of our wellness committee that we've established. So that concludes a brief overview of becoming a trauma-informed organization. Again, it is imperative that you do a self-study and assessment of where you are at now and develop action planning around that. I have the guide. If you would like to access that, just contact us, as well as we'd be more than willing to mentor you with you and your organization to help your organization to become more trauma integrated. Thank you.